Excellent. Okay, so the time is approximately 1 minute to 2 here in the UK. I've got a few people who have already joined us. I would love to see where you are watching the webinar from. So if you want to just let me know, that will both tell me where you are located and also whether the sound and the video is working for you. So who have we got out there? Yeah, we've got more people joining. We've got Turkey, Istanbul, we've got Toronto. Toronto sound is all good. Excellent. Yeah, that looks good. Frankfurt, Germany. Nice to see you all. If you were around for my first webinar, I've already given one webinar this morning for the Cognity Engage event, which was great fun. So if you might be watching me for the second time in one day, which is probably sufficient. Okay, so it is now 2 o'clock. I'm going to get this thing started. So we're looking today at how to use TOK to strengthen university applications, and it's for me, it kind of bridged two roles that I played in my last school. So I was head of sixth form, helping students to get into university all around the world, and I was also the TOK coordinator. And as I'll say, I discovered that TOK can be a very, very useful tool in helping students gain their place of study. Okay, so a quick outline of what we're going to be looking at. I will just introduce myself, followed by just an outline of why I think TOK is so special. And then I'm going to focus on 4 ways in which I think TOK can help students gain a place at university. So I'm going to be thinking about TOK thinkers that they can draw on, TOK ideas that they can emphasize, how to demonstrate that their learning is applicable to the real world, signposting skills and attributes that they have developed as a result of TOK, and then just a final think about how to make the most of what they are producing at the end of the TOK course, i.e. the essay and the exhibition. Then I'd just like to quickly outline events that we have coming up and aspects of support that we offer, and that will be the webinar. So just a quick outline of what we're doing here. I'm referring a lot to you in the webinar. So I talk a lot about you as learners, you as students. So obviously I'm kind of aiming this at students, but I'm expecting that most people watching this will be teachers. Probably you're going to go ahead and share this with your students, which of course I'm very happy for you to do, and hopefully encourage your students to make TOK one of the kind of central pillars of their university or college applications. The event will last an hour. I will be kind of monitoring the chat and seeing questions as they come in. I'll try to respond to them if I think they're relevant. Otherwise, we may have a quick 10 minutes or so at the end in which you can ask questions. But if you prefer, you can send questions my way by email afterwards. And I'll be sending out a debrief email with a link to the recording, our responses to some of the FAQs, and also a link to the presentation that I'm using right now, because it's got quite a few clickable links on it. If you so desire, I will also provide you with an attendance certificate. So if you just email me, if you want one of those, I'll be very happy to provide you with a certificate. Okay. So I like TOK. If you've seen webinars with me before, the one this morning, the ones that I've done at other times, I'm a bit obsessive, a bit of a fanatic when it comes to TOK. I think it is a very, very special subject. I think it is the best element of the DP, and I have done quite a few other roles. I've been a history teacher, a teacher of film. I've taught geography. I've taught politics. I've done a lot of different things. Nothing grabs me like TOK, and nothing I think that we offer in the diploma program is quite so relevant to what students need right now in this very, very strange world that we are living in. Now, I don't think it's just me that thinks TOK is very special. Universities love the IB diploma in general and TOK in particular. I'm based here in Cambridge, so I know a lot of people who work at the university. They are pretty exigent when it comes to gaining entry here. You know, this is one of the most difficult universities in the world to gain entrance to. And the people who I speak to who are involved in admissions at Cambridge University tell me, you know, the IB diploma students stand out, and TOK in particular is really valued. Just a quote there from someone not from Cambridge, but from Harvard, in another Cambridge, the duplicate Cambridge, if you like. Howard Gardner says the DP helps students to think critically, synthesize knowledge, reflect on their own thought processes, and get their feet wet in interdisciplinary thinking. Now, I use that quote because I think it's a great summary of not just the DP, but the TOK course. I think this is exactly what we do. This is exactly what universities are looking for. And I think we need to signpost it. I think we need to make it explicit when we are trying to apply for university, looking for the next stage in our kind of intellectual journey. You know, I think TOK can be at the core of a successful university application. As I say in this webinar, as I contend in this webinar, I think this is because the ideas that students learn, the thinkers that they encounter, the way that they relate the concepts to the real world, and the skills that they develop make students very, very desirable candidates. It's exactly what universities are looking for. It's much more than those sort of the very insufficient grades that somehow are used to evaluate us as candidates. You know, TOK is so much more than that. It's a brilliant addition. It's a brilliant thing to be able to draw on when you are applying to university. So this webinar will discuss, you know, why that is so, and it ties in with a resource that we're about to release. You know, you'll have noticed I've already expanded this to 12 ways in which TOK can be used. We are producing a resource which is 100 ways. I'm going to look at 100 ways in which TOK can help you get into university, looking at lots of different ideas, thinkers, skills, etc. So a little bit more about that later in the webinar, but it's kind of tied in with that. Okay, so let's begin by thinking about TOK ideas. Now, I'm absolutely genuine when I say that I think TOK is life-changing. I think the ideas are life-changing. And I say that because it's changed my life. You know, I've come across ideas, I've learned about ideas, I've explored ideas that have completely changed the way I look at the world. And I think that's one of the beautiful aspects of TOK. It changes us as teachers, and that's palpable to the students that we deal with. They're aware of how much we've been affected by TOK, and it's infectious. You know, they can see how big these ideas are, and how, you know, they can help us to make sense of the world, how they can identify anyone involved in TOK as sophisticated, discerning knowers. Now, you know, I would ask students to think broadly about the big ideas that we look at in TOK, and if you want, you can focus in on those 12 key concepts, which are a new part of the course. You know, we look at things like truth, we look at perspectives, bias. That's not one of the 12 key concepts, but, you know, it's a very important part of TOK. You can't really teach TOK without dealing with bias, with unconscious bias, confirmation bias. We look at evidence, we look at certainty. You may also deal with relativism as well, you know, when it comes to looking at ethics and values. These are massive ideas. These are huge ideas. These are absolutely essential ideas if we are going to be nuanced about our understanding of the world. So being able to refer to those kind of ideas will show anyone involved in university application decisions that your worldview, you as a student, has been formed via, you know, familiarity with these big ideas. You've drawn on them to help you develop your worldview, and it makes you a very, very impressive candidate to any university around the world. So, you know, it's just so full of ideas. I had to kind of narrow it down and pick out a few. So the idea of 12 in this webinar is because I've picked out 3 key examples for each of these 4 different aspects that I'm going to be looking through. So here are 3 ideas that I think are, you know, just fantastic examples, but they're kind of picked at random because there are so many things there. So I begin, one of my first lessons that I look at with my students is it's entitled ECRI, which you will probably be familiar with. It's Carl Sagan's acronym for extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. We as knowers, we as positive, responsible members of the epistemic community have to justify our claims with evidence, you know, and if there's maybe one key takeaway from the TOK course, I mean, that's impossible, of course, isn't it? But, you know, I tell my students that you have to justify every claim with evidence. You cannot just make a claim because you want it to be true, because you feel like it might be true. You have to have demonstrable evidence for your claims. Otherwise, your beliefs and your opinions are essentially worthless. So ECRI is a fantastic idea for students to grasp. It's one of the first ones that I deal with. It links to many aspects of TOK. It links to all aspects of TOK because it applies to every area of knowledge. I think it's very sort of close to the core theme, knowledge and the knower, because it deals with us on a kind of individual level and how we interact with other communities of knowers. We have to be able to justify our opinions with evidence that we can show to others. As I say, I don't think there's enough of that going on right now. People are fond of pontificating and making these outlandish claims without any legitimate basis for what they're saying. Okay, so that's a great starting point. I think a great idea that students can kind of emphasize and refer to in university interviews and applications. I think one of the aspects of TOK that I try to do with my students is to make them sophisticated thinkers. This is kind of one of the attributes that we are trying to aim for when it comes to both of the assessment tasks. We're trying to make them sophisticated. We're trying to make them nuanced. To be able to do that, I think you need to kind of show to them how a lot of thinkers deal with knowledge, and then how to take one step beyond. Okay, so a good example of that would be the scientific method. I think it's very, very important for students to have an understanding of the scientific method, to understand why it is such a wonderful construct, to understand why it is one of the kind of glories of human intellectual achievement, the scientific method. However, if we want to take that one step beyond, if we want to show that we're sophisticated thinkers, I think we have to show that, you know, although we're aware of this method of producing knowledge in the sciences, there are many other ways of doing it. And I've got a link there to a fabulous TED talk by Stuart Firestein, who refers to, if you'll excuse the expression, of how scientists often fart around in the dark. In other words, you know, we are ignorant of things, and actually he offers a course, I think at Columbia, about, you know, the aspects that we simply don't know about science. Another way of putting it, I think he talks about trying to find a dark cat in a dark room, or a needle in a pile of needles. You know, science is such a huge endeavor. And so much of it happens by accident, and so much of it, you know, we make a discovery, but that then leads us on to an understanding of how little we know, rather than how much we know. So much of it happens by chance. So much of it happens without planning. Although we should always remember that quote by Louis Pasteur about chance favoring the prepared mind. But as I say, this sort of indicates, you know, a sophisticated understanding of science. So we're aware of the scientific method. We understand how important it is, but we also understand if you like, the limitations of it in providing us with a model for the production of knowledge in the natural sciences, because there are many other ways in which knowledge is produced and then used. And then history, a little closer to my own heart as a former history teacher. And again, this kind of two-step approach, right? So there are many students who will be very happy with themselves and very sort of keen to show that they've come across Churchill's quote about history being written by the victors. And he also said, history will be kind to me, for I intend to write it, which is exactly, of course, what he did. Now that, that shows quite a nice understanding of history, how it's kind of malleable and how it's often controlled by the winning side. But it's very, very limited, actually. And when you start to look at examples of how history is written, you'll see that it's often not written by the victors. It's often written by the defeated side. In the course that I run with my students, the Big Question framework for TOK, we look at how the Confederate side has attempted to rewrite the history of the American Civil War. And actually, they have been a lot more active in trying to rewrite history and try and portray their version of what happened. And it's referred to as the lost cause. Because they have kind of ennobled this essentially a struggle over slavery and turned it into something completely different. And that struggle continues. And history viewed in that way turns out to be a struggle for control of the narrative. And so students who see that instantly identify themselves as incredibly sophisticated thinkers. This is what TOK can do for us. It's fabulous, taking us way beyond just a simple understanding of history. And it's going to impress any person making decisions about applications to university. So, these are just 3 examples of so many ideas that we look at in TOK that can make students sophisticated and nuanced thinkers and demonstrate to any college application team or university application team how good they are and how prepared they are to sort of go beyond the headlines, if you like. Okay, so those are ideas, just a few examples of the ideas that we look at. Now, I think it's, one of the privileges for me as a TOK teacher is being able to explore just the most incredible thinkers from the present and from the past, and introduce them to your students. And it's just it's a wonderful experience as an educator to be the one who is introducing these people to our young learners. And their ability to be able to, well, I've referred to it as name dropping, which maybe has a negative connotation, but being able to just refer to people, to thinkers, to philosophers, scientists, artists, when you are going for an interview at university, when you're writing your college application, it's just going to show that, well, you're connected to the debates and discussions going on in the world, and also that you're willing to take on board the ideas of others, to support your own ideas, and to consider different kind of worldviews and perspectives. Now, it's easy to get caught up in just a sort of litany of dead white males, which of course I am one myself. So we have the obvious, we have the usual sort of suspects: Plato and Socrates, Mill, Orwell, Kant, Descartes. There are obviously the academic field has been dominated for a long time by a certain ethnic origin and a certain gender. I don't want to detract from their achievements, though. George Orwell for me is the hero of TOK. I think he's just a wonderful human being for all the work he did, for all the insights he gave us. I love John Stuart Mill. All of these other people are fascinating individuals, and they've changed the way we relate with the world. But that's not enough. We need a little more diversity in the thinkers we look at, in the thoughts that we approach, and happily we can easily find those from perhaps a more modern era of thinking. Elizabeth Loftus is a huge hero for me, for her work on memory and how false memories can affect the way we sort of interact with reality. Paul Bloom on empathy, Julia Garleff on scout thinking. That's such a brilliant idea. Be a scout rather than a soldier when you're thinking about the world, and she has so much to say on overcoming our confirmation bias. Leslie Hazelton's thoughts on how doubt is an essential part of religious faith completely changed my own understanding of what it is to be religious. Tai Selassie on being a multi-local and kind of the myth of nationalism is brilliant fodder for your students to have a look at. So, you know, again, there are loads and loads of examples. Now, to focus on three, I love the work of Elif Shafak, who talks a lot about the power of art and how art can help us to connect with other people. Her quote there, you know, sort of summarizes one aspect of what she can help us with in TOK. Stories cannot demolish frontiers, but they can punch holes in our mental walls, and through those holes, we can get a glimpse of the other and sometimes even like what we see. So in other words, it helps us to overcome antagonistic perspectives, how sometimes we clash with others. You know, there is art which we can all kind of agree on, we can all use to connect with other and access the kind of common experience of being human. So she has wonderful ideas there which relate primarily to the arts, but also kind of how, you know, individual knowers can link up no matter what their kind of community of knowers actually is. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie is a brilliant speaker, and I use her in my lessons to talk about single stories, you know, well, again, many aspects of TOK, history, politics, just looking at another culture. We find ourselves falling into the trap of judging other people in a very kind of generalized, stereotypical way, and making our understanding and assessment of them just based on one single story. And as someone who has lived in South America for many, many years in Colombia and Peru, and I'm married to a Peruvian, I know how a lot of Latin Americans are judged in one way, which I won't even bring up, but it's a very stereotypical view of them, reinforced by kind of Hollywood movies. And of course, you know, there's so much more to Latin American culture. Happily, this is now coming out, and it's not being so stereotypical, but there's such a rich culture and philosophical heritage there, just wonderful linguistic traditions. And of course, you know, you cannot summarize another people just via one story, but it's often used, this sort of approach, in order to play a game of sort of power politics and kind of prop up the position of more dominant cultures. So looking at that idea just instantly makes us a more nuanced thinker, identifies us as people who go beyond just the sort of superficial, and shows a great understanding of history and politics. John McWhorter, another great example of a TOK thinker, someone you can pull out of your hat to kind of refer to in a discussion with a university kind of admissions board. You know, we are so keen to tell our young learners, our students these days, that sort of texting and smartphones are dumbing down language. You know, technology in general is undermining the kind of intellectual integrity of the media and our understanding of the world. And it's lovely to hear an argument to the opposite. So for John McWhorter, texting, as he puts it, is a miraculous thing. In other words, this is a new form of communication. It's not an alternative to the way we normally communicate. It is a new form of communication. And if you follow the link there, it'll take you through to a great story there. And I think this is a lovely person to refer to when you are trying to counter the kind of dominant narrative about what's happening in the world, and show that, yeah, okay, so there could be some negative implications of overuse of smartphones and the internet and so on. However, you know, let's consider the other side. And I think that that would identify a student as being, again, a nuanced thinker, someone who is not necessarily ready just to go along with the flow and just follow what everyone else is saying about the direction of society and knowledge. So again, 3 thinkers just picked randomly to show that you are a really sophisticated thinker, someone who is aware of the debates going on in the world today, and demonstrate to any university that you are a kind of formidable thinker and a great candidate. Okay, so one of the things very close to my heart as a TOK teacher is that the course is an incredibly useful one for understanding the world. A lot of people who are not perhaps as familiar with the nature of TOK are apt to think of it as this slightly strange, abstract, esoteric kind of course that doesn't have much of a place in the real world. I think the reverse is true. I think the ideas and the concepts we come across in TOK can be applied to the real world to allow us to understand them, and kind of vice versa. We draw on what's going on in the world to make sense of ideas and explore the concepts that we come across in TOK. So being able to relate your understanding of TOK, I think, very powerfully demonstrates your abilities as a thinker, and also how you've been affected by the course. Now, as I say to my students, you don't have to go far to come up with examples of this. Personally, with my students, I cover topics such as alternative medicine. I love looking at causation and correlation. Some people say it's a slightly cliched topic. I really don't think it is. I think it's a brilliant one to look at, particularly for the human sciences. We look at cultural appropriation. We look at fake news, the way in which history is constantly rewritten, historical revisionism. We look at different ways of understanding language, such as linguistic determinism. Pseudoscience, of course, it plays a huge role in the TOK course. So all of these things just make you such a kind of brilliant thinker, such a nuanced thinker, and make you such an impressive candidate for any university. To be able to show that you are familiar with these kind of things, is such a powerful tool for you to gain entrance into your choice of university. So again, just pulling off some examples. These are 3 here that will feature in the next TOK newsletter. So this is what I'm looking at right now. This is what's going on in the world right now. This is for me one of the privileges of being a TOK teacher, that you can explore these kind of ideas. You can be connected so well to what's going on in the world right now. So we've got a trucker protest, right? So I got some of you from Canada. You will be up to speed on what's going on right now. And there are quite a few articles that you can use for this. This one, I think, comes from Wired magazine, looking at how a lot of right-wing personalities and social media platforms such as Facebook are fueling the truck blockade that is still going on in Ottawa, and it's quite a major problem and a bit of a challenge for old Trudeau up there. For us in TOK, we're interested in the kind of thing that drives these sort of protests and reactions, and we got a lot of blending of anti-vax sentiment with conspiracy theories, and it's fascinating the reasons why these protests are going on. So this is a really, really interesting story that's happening right now, and the kind of thing that can show that you as a TOK student is totally connected to what's going on in the real world. And TOK, it doesn't just give you a sort of superficial descriptive coverage of these sort of events and issues. It invites you to delve deeply into what's going on without making a judgment, and that's what's beautiful about it. And if you can demonstrate that kind of thing, again, you're really marking yourself out as an effective thinker and candidate. I've just come across this story as well recently. It's been Holocaust Memorial Day over the last month, and there's a report that's recently been published on how the wonderful story and film, The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, might feel dangerous Holocaust fallacies, because it sort of misleads in some way. If we look at that as the model of the Holocaust, then we're actually we're in a dangerous position, because that's a fictionalized account of what happened, and of course it's only one sort of story, in countless stories of what happened in Europe during the 1940s. So, it's a very, very insufficient source for us to understand the full extent of the Holocaust. And in some ways, it can mislead us in terms of what happened. So again, I have provided you with a link to one article. There are quite a lot of articles actually being published on that. I think that one comes from the Independent newspaper. This also sort of links to a broader question about how we learn about the past, how we learn about history via film and literature, the arts, in other words. So that's a question in itself, quite apart from whether or not we should be relying on this source. How do we, in general, connect with the past? And for most people, it's through entirely fictional sources. So that's a really interesting question. Again, could come up in an interview, and to be able to talk about that would be absolutely brilliant. I really enjoyed this story as well, the Fight Club story, and it turned out that this is unfolding again, another story that's going on right now. The movie, which I'm a big fan of, the Fight Club, the ending was edited by authorities in China, so that it showed the authorities actually winning, rather than sort of the explosions going off and a kind of revolution about to happen, which of course we condemned, we sort of free-thinking liberals, until the author of the book actually praised the ending. He thought that was actually more appropriate than the original end, which made it quite an interesting story. But then, very surprisingly, the original end was restored to the film. So it was a lovely kind of story to develop, in front of our eyes. Great links to politics, to the arts, and just a fantastic story to be able to refer to if you're in a university interview, the kind of thing that you could discuss and show that you're connected to things going on in the world. Okay, so it's perhaps slightly more difficult to talk about the sort of skills that TOK develops, but I think nonetheless it's a great thing to be able to refer to. If you're kind of asked, how have you developed as a learner? What have been your best learning experiences, and so on? Focus in on TOK. Focus in on the things that we train you to do in TOK. Not just skills, but kind of maybe slightly broader attributes of us as thinkers. Now, at theoryofknowledge.net, we try to align the TOK course as much as we can to the 4 C's, to critical thinking, creativity, communication, and collaboration. So those are 4 skills that I think you can very much emphasize as being things that you've taken ownership of. These, if you're not familiar with them, the 4 C's they've been around for quite a while. Again, maybe even a cliche, but I think with a lot of cliches, there's a great deal of truth connected to them. I think these really are things we should be aspiring to develop in our students, and for us in TOK, they are so easy to support with examples. This is absolutely what we are doing in TOK. We are obviously thinking critically. We are trying to think in a kind of lateral, original, creative way. We are communicating our ideas, both sort of verbally in class, but also via the essay and the exhibition. And we're collaborating. Bit of a shame, perhaps, that we no longer do the presentation in that sense. It was nice, for me at least, to have a kind of group project as part of the final assessment. But nonetheless, in my classes, certainly, I encourage as much group work and collaboration. We are sharing ideas. That's how we learn, I think, in TOK. So, another one to highlight as part of your application profile. So I think that, they are absolutely central to the TOK course, even if you don't follow the big question framework, which is how on the site, within the site for members, we kind of structure the course. Even if you don't follow that course, this is very much what you are doing as a TOK teacher and what you're developing as a TOK student. So, to be able to, refer to how you've developed these skills, these 4 skills, is going to make you a very impressive candidate. Now, to talk a little more specifically about skills and attributes, again, I can pull out loads that I think happen during the TOK course, but here are 3 examples that I think are worth kind of emphasizing. I think TOK makes you a very reflective person, makes you a very reflective learner. Specifically, you can refer to how TOK allows you to question your other subjects, the 6 other subjects that you are doing. It makes you think critically about the nature of knowledge in mathematics. Is it as objective as is often portrayed, or are there ways in which it changes over time? Different perspectives when it comes to mathematics, the way in which we use language, science, and so on. This is going to show universities that you're able to interlink your learning, think about it, reflect on it, compare and contrast. So I think this marks you out, it marks students out as ready to learn autonomously, which of course is one of the key things that they're looking for. Self-awareness. I think TOK, for me, is all about the students being aware of their own assumptions and biases, and well, for a start, starting with an awareness of them, because they're very keen to say other people are biased, but I'm not. But I want them to acknowledge that they are biased. We are all biased in some way based on our kind of background, our culture, our language, the point in time when we are working and living. So it's about being self-aware. It's about being aware that we are all biased, we are all flawed, we all have our own point of view and perspective on the world, and how that affects the way we produce our knowledge. I think just by being aware, just by showing that we are aware, that gives you an edge as a thinker. But you can go even further than that, and you can draw on the ideas of people like John Stuart Mill, who said that we need to have the humility to accept that we might be wrong. And if you don't have that humility, you're never going to learn, you're never going to advance, you're never going to develop as a knower. So, that's one of my kind of endpoints for TOK, getting to that stage when students are able to do that. And again, that kind of thing. Of course, saying to a higher place of learning, a university, a college, I have the humility to accept that I don't know everything and I want to be taught more. Well, obviously that's a pretty fundamental kind of attribute that I don't think everyone is aware that they need. Open-minded, we all like to say that we're open-minded. Many of us really aren't. So how many of us genuinely are open-minded? But more importantly than that, really, when it comes to this kind of thing, university applications, how many of us can offer evidence that we're open-minded? And I think TOK provides us with that evidence. Again, examples, I think there are endless from the TOK course. We can refer to how we've looked at the sort of imaginative leaps that have made incredible ideas in science like quantum mechanics possible. We look at indigenous societies and how they have a completely different approach to the world. For example, their conception of ownership, which gives them a totally different understanding of our responsibilities to the natural world. Two very small examples of how we are constantly considering different perspectives, different points of view, and actually realizing that there's more than one route to knowledge. It doesn't just have to be a scientific positivist approach. There are lots of other ways of producing amazing knowledge and insights about the world. So, another really, really great skill or attribute to be able to highlight when you're applying to university. Okay, so we in TOK produce 2 tangible pieces of work that highlight all of these skills and more. They are, of course, the essay and the exhibition. And I have, for a long time now, encouraged my students when they apply to university to make their TOK essay a central aspect of the university application. And I remember still sending, one student who managed to get an interview at Cambridge here when I was living in Peru. I got an interview here at one of the colleges at Cambridge, and he took his essay with him. And that was one of the reasons why he was offered a place here. And it was a very, very high grade offer he was made. Happily, he managed to get those grades, but it was TOK that provided him with one of the bases for his conversations with the applications people. He was able to talk about the title that he wrote about. He was able to talk about why he chose that title, linking it to his pre-existing knowledge and his interests. He was able to talk about the research that went on, the challenges that he came across, his arguments, his conclusion. And this is one of the reasons why he managed to get a place at such a good university. So I think that your TOK essay can be a great, as I say, tangible piece of proof that you are a thinker, that you are a critical thinker, that you are all these other things. Other people can refer to themselves as having these skills, but here's my essay. This shows the kind of person that I am. So it's a lovely piece of evidence of you as a thinker. The exhibition, I think, functions in almost exactly the same way. It's testing slightly different assessment skills, of course, but it can show that you have skills as a researcher. It shows your engagement with the real world. It shows how you think critically about contemporary and past situations. So, and I think as well, perhaps it has a little more emphasis on communicative skills. You can put together a really nice file with your objects, with your commentary, and I think that's quite an impressive sort of almost portfolio of ideas that you can present to universities that you are applying to. So make the most of those assessment products. The nice thing about TOK is you don't just end up with grades, you end up with the assessment products that you've made, your essay and your exhibition. So you've got them, they're portable, you can take them with you. By all means, turn up at a university with a little portfolio of ideas and hand them over to the people if you have an interview, or share them electronically if you're being interviewed online. So this is a great aspect, I think, of the TOK course. Okay, so we're kind of at the end of the content of this webinar. So I wanted to mention again the fact that this links to a big resource that we are busy producing right now. It's going to be launched in March 2022. So this is 100 ways to use TOK to get into university. You have just seen 12 ways to use TOK to get into university. It's also going to be a resource that we update every year, because I think I'm going to be outlining some of the real life situations, events and issues that have happened in the past year that you can maybe draw on when you apply to university. And I'm going to be updating the thinkers, and I'm going to be updating the kind of skills. So every year we'll produce a new version of this. So it's going to provide loads of guidance on using the content from the TOK course and the skills that are developed during the TOK course to strengthen university applications. There's a little link there. You can have a look at the guide in a little more detail. You can pre-order it now if you want a copy now. We're also producing 2 other packs, one for the essay, one for the exhibition. So we're producing a bundle as well to make it slightly more economical. So you can follow that link and see what the options are. A little word about other events coming up. So we have quite a few events already planned for this year. The next one, we're going to be thinking about teaching TOK online, because I know, unfortunately, quite a few schools have slipped back into online teaching. I think in general, I hope this is not too optimistic of me, but I think in general, the end of this terrible pandemic is in sight, but we still have a little bit of a way to go. And for some schools, I think, particularly in the United States, online learning has kicked in again. So I'm gonna do a rehash of a webinar I did a year ago about teaching TOK online, just giving a few tips about ways that you can do it. Then at the end of March, we're going to be looking at the N22 titles, which aren't yet out, but they will be out quite soon, I think in probably a month or so. So I'll be having a look at those titles, just offering sort of ideas on how you can kick off the essay writing process with your students. 21st of April, I'm going to be going on a journey of TOK lesson creation. Okay, so we're going to start off with a real life situation, event, or an issue, which I don't even know what that is. It's going to be something happening in April, so something from that time, and I'm going to look at how we can create a lesson from that event or issue, so that real world event. I'm going to look at TOK and ethics in May, and think about how this course is really one of the moral compasses for the whole of the educational experience for students, and certainly for the DP. And then in June, I'm going to do the first of what's going to become an annual webinar event, which is wrapping up the TOK year. I'm going to be looking at some of the highlights from the last year in terms of real world events and issues. So that again will be a ticketed event. So those are our events coming up. I probably don't need to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. A few sort of pointers on the free and members only materials that we provide. So if you want to sign up for our free monthly newsletter, you can do so by following the link here. There's a copy of the last edition as well. We're producing more and more videos. We're about to release quite a few more videos, so keep your eyes open for those. This will be online quite soon as well. So videos and guidance notes on the exhibition and essay, TOK Explainer videos. Of course, loads and loads of free stuff on the site for the core theme, the optional themes, and the areas of knowledge. You can have a quick look at some of the members' resources, or some samples for the members' resources by following that link. And then for members, loads and loads of changes coming up, loads and loads of new stuff coming up. We've got some support packs, which you get a discount for if you're a member. We've got our lessons, which we're constantly updating. I don't need to go into too much detail. You can follow those links for yourself. But basically, we're looking at constantly updated material and support for the TOK course, which hopefully makes us a lot more than just a textbook for TOK, textbookless TOK, which is a bit of a mouthful to say. And then finally, if COVID really is coming to an end, which I have hopes for, we will be once again visiting schools. It's one of my massive privileges as a TOK educator to have visited lots of schools around the world. We will be doing that again in the coming months. I've got a couple lined up already that are online. I've got one coming up in Europe a little bit later in the year. But if you would like to work with me on making TOK brilliant in your school, then do get in touch. You can have a look at our workshop page, and we can get something set up, and hopefully get your students loving TOK, getting your teachers loving TOK, be they TOK specialists or not. Okay, so that's our last aspect of support, our workshops around the world. So we've come to the end. It's just about 13 minutes to 3 in London, or Cambridge as I am now. I would love to have some questions now. I'll be happy to take them. If not, then of course you can send me in your questions, and I will respond to them in the debrief when I send it out. So let me read out some questions. If your students asked if you have demonstrable evidence for your claim requiring demonstrable evidence, how do you ground your base worldview premises? That sounds like a really complicated question, but an interesting one. I might try and answer that in written form. How do we show demonstrable evidence? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, this is the thing about TOK. For me, a lot of schools around the world say they do certain things. They say they're critical thinkers. They say they're doing these wonderful things. But, you know, if they're not doing the DP, if they're not doing TOK, it's much harder for them to show that they are doing this. So TOK for me is the demonstrable evidence, that the essay and the exhibition are demonstrable evidence. The ability to talk about these ideas and thinkers is the demonstrable evidence. The way in which they can draw together all their subjects and compare and contrast them in terms of how they use knowledge is the demonstrable evidence. So I don't know whether that answers the question, but that to me, you know, is part and parcel of TOK. What today you said, we are all biased in some way. It doesn't only have to be a scientific positivist approach. So how do we represent and enable our students with traditional cultural and religious beliefs at odds with current fashion in universities? Yeah, I mean, so you're saying, yeah, I mean, I have mostly taught in schools which were strongly Roman Catholic. And so if you ever sort of find yourself inviting a question towards the legitimacy of that kind of thing, which I don't really do. I mean, I just offer it as one sort of part of the worldview, but you can run into some quite interesting discussions. No, I don't really, I haven't had this problem. I mean, I do think that you know, when for me one of the keys to this is looking at indigenous knowledge and looking at some of the discoveries that indigenous peoples have made. And you know, they haven't used a scientific method in any way, shape or form, and yet they've somehow managed to produce extraordinary medicines and chemical compounds. You know, I'm thinking here of ayahuasca, for example, you know, which it's extraordinary, the story behind the kind of synthesis of that. You know, there are so many examples of that kind of thing, and it's not just about the production of objective evidence and knowledge about the world. It's just a different way of being, a different way of viewing and understanding the world. You know, and I look at the kind of navigators of the South Pacific and how they can navigate via the stars rather than GPS. Leslie Hazelton's stories about how doubt is essential to faith, which completely undermines maybe some of our views about how, you know, religion can link to fanaticism. I don't know. I think there are so many thinkers and so many ideas that can take us in a direction that demonstrate that that there are different approaches to understanding the world and different approaches to viewing the world. You know, we're not necessarily talking about approaches that would be unfashionable in universities. We're not necessarily talking about the way in which we might construct a rocket to go to the moon. We're talking about more sort of fundamental ideas and coping with the sort of nature of mortality, and you know, there's I think there's quite a lot of material that you can use to counter this idea that there's only one way of viewing the world. And I read an article, quite an interesting article today, which was all about, I might put this in as a link in the debrief email, about how we it's from Louis Theroux, who's just made a really interesting and very, very challenging documentary for the BBC on some of the subcultures in the United States. And he's basically airing views which are extraordinarily awful. There's no other way of putting it. You know, people who are kind of racist. He's looking at pedophiles. He's looking at, you know, he focuses on one person who believes that women shouldn't have the vote. So these are terrible views. But his view is, you know, we don't need to accept these views, but we need to at least listen to these views. So I think, you know, if you have this approach to there is only one way of understanding the world, and we are going to cancel everything else that challenges that, then we are clearly, you know, gonna end up in problematic territory. This article is really worth reading. You know, he's really saying to understand, we have to listen, and it doesn't matter if these are views that we find obnoxious and awful and terrible. We have to understand. We have to begin by listening to what they are saying. So I will post that article, because he's met some very challenging people in his time. I think he's a brilliant filmmaker, a brilliant documentary maker, a very brave documentary maker as well. So, you know, that might sort of give you some fodder as well. What was the source of the Thoreau article? I believe it was The Guardian, but I'll send you a link. So if you're registered for this, I'll send you out a link. Someone is saying, please, can we get your email address? That's easy. michael@theoryofknowledge.net. I think on this presentation, there'll be a link to it. If you go to the site as well, it's quite easy to get hold of. I think that might be all the questions, and we're kind of running out of time. We've only got 5 minutes until it's 3 o'clock. If anyone has any more questions, now is the time to throw them at me. I don't think I have anything on the Q&A, so it's just the chat. Okay, then I think I'm going to wrap this up. Many thanks for joining me. I will send this out very soon. Probably most of you watching this right now is, well, you guys are watching this live, but most people will be watching this recorded, so you will have received the debrief email. Thanks a lot for joining me. If you managed to catch me earlier as well, I hope you enjoyed the morning session. If you didn't catch me for that, the Cognity event was great, and you can access it by putting in a search for Cognity Engage 2022, and you don't have to pay for it. It says you have to pay for it. If you put in the discount code Michael100, that'll give you a ticket for it. I think it's still going on if you're watching this live, so you can still catch some of it, but you can access the videos and things like that. And it's quite a good session to be involved in. Thank you for your thank yous. I hope this inspired a little bit. I hope it showed the usefulness of TOK, and I'll be really happy to receive your feedback, maybe some of your experiences as well in how TOK has helped to enrich students' university applications. So many thanks. It's been a pleasure as always, and I'll catch you for the next webinar. Goodbye.